Amina felt a shiver run through her, but she did not look away. There was something in Ngali's eyes, something ancient, powerful, and unshakable. It reminded her of the roots of the forest, deep and enduring. She could sense a truth he had yet to speak, but she did not fear him. Her love for him had grown not out of mystery or awe, but from the kindness he had shown her, the way he made her feel seen and whole. Ngali held her gaze, his voice steady, yet filled with emotion. "Amina, there is something I must tell you. I am not just a traveler who wandered into your path. I am Ngali, the god of the forest. Your parents promised you to me long ago." Amina's breath caught, her heart racing as the words sank in. She knew of him, but she never knew him. In fact, she never even knew he existed for real. To think her parents never hinted once of her destiny. "Then, all this time," she whispered, her voice trembling, "you've been watching over me?" "Yes," Ngali said, his tone filled with both tenderness and strength. "I have waited for you, not to demand what was promised, but to allow you choice. I wanted you to know me, not as a god, but as someone who cares for you deeply. Now you know the truth. Will you still choose me, knowing who I am?" For a moment, Amina was silent. She felt the weight of his revelation pressing on her, the enormity of what it meant. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw no demand, no expectation, only love and hope. "Yes," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I would choose you, Ngali, not because of destiny or any promise, but because my heart has found its home with you." A look of pure joy spread across Ngali's face, as though he had waited lifetimes to hear those words. He stood tall, his presence radiating a beauty and majesty that seemed to make the stars above shine brighter. The air around them felt alive, humming with the energy of the forest itself. "You have made your choice," Ngali said, his voice deep and filled with reverence. "And so have I. You are not only my bride, Amina. You are my equal, my partner, and the light that will guide me." As he took her hand, the forest seemed to glow, the trees swaying in harmony as if they too were celebrating. Together, they sat beneath the vast sky, watching the stars dance, knowing their union was not just destiny fulfilled, but a love freely chosen. While Amina lived peacefully in the forest, the village was beset by terrible misfortunes. It began with the crops. Once green and abundant, the fields turned brittle and dry, with stalks that barely grew an inch before withering into the ground. Day after day, the farmers tended their land with desperate hearts, watching their efforts turn to dust. When they went to fetch water, they found the river low and shrinking, the once clear water reduced to a slow, muddy trickle. "What has happened to us?" they muttered to one another, scratching their heads in fear and confusion. But their misfortune did not end there. The animals, once plentiful, began to disappear. Goats wandered off and did not return. Chickens vanished without a trace, leaving empty coops and silent courtyards. The villagers, once joyful and busy, were now filled with worry and despair. The days grew hotter, and no rain fell to cool the scorched earth. Mothers clutched their children, whispering stories of curses and angry spirits. Fathers looked to the sky, hoping for signs of rain. But the sky remained clear, its unbroken blue as dry as their fields. The first to suspect the truth was the village's priest, an old man named Baba Oluko. One night, as he sat in the quiet of his shrine, he felt a deep sense of unease, a stirring in the air that he had not felt in years. He lit his incense and scrambled his cowrie shells and began to pray, calling upon the Spirit to give him a sign, to show him the way to relieve his people's suffering. The smoke curled into the air, and the flames flickered as though in answer. Then, in the silence of the night, a vision came to him. He saw a figure, cloaked in shadows, standing in the heart of the forest. The figure's eyes burned like fire, and its voice was like thunder, echoing in Baba Oluko's mind. You have cast out my bride, the one I chose, the one who was promised to me. For your cruelty, you shall suffer until you learn the price of jealousy and anger. Baba Oluko gasped, clutching his chest as the vision faded. He stumbled out of that shrine, his face pale, his heart pounding with fear and urgency. By the gods of our land, we have angered a spirit, he whispered, his voice shaking. We have brought upon this land calamity, and we brought this upon ourselves. The next morning, he called for a gathering in the village square. The villagers, exhausted and desperate, came together looking to him for answers. People of the village, Baba Oluko said, his voice grave, I have seen a vision. The spirits are angry with us, for we have done a great wrong. We cast out one of our own, an innocent girl who brought us only kindness, and now we suffer the consequences. The spirit who claimed her as his bride has laid this curse upon us. At these words, the villagers gasped, their faces going pale. Some clutched their hearts, others looked around in fear, as though expecting the angry spirit to appear among them right then and there. Amina, they whispered, guilt and dread filling their voices. In the crowd, Halima, Zuri, and Adana looked at each other with troubled eyes. They had not expected this. They had only wanted to rid themselves of a girl they envied, to protect their pride and soothe their jealousy. But now, faced with the weight of what they had done, they felt the bitter taste of regret. What have we done? Zuri whispered, her voice trembling. Halima swallowed, looking away as if the ground could shield her from the truth. We did not mean for this to happen, she muttered. We were wrong. Adana shook her head, her face pale with fear. We must make this right or we are all doomed. The villagers began to murmur, looking to Baba Oluko with pleading eyes. What can we do to lift the curse? They asked, their voices filled with desperation. Baba Oluko took a deep breath, gathering his strength. We must go to the forest, he said. We must find Amina and beg for her forgiveness. Only she can speak on our behalf to the God who has laid this punishment upon us. And so, led by Baba Oluko, the villagers prepared gifts of food, clothes, deeds, hoping these offerings would show their remorse. They gathered at the edge of the forest, their hearts pounding with fear and shame. The three women, Halima, Zuri, and Adana, carried the heaviest burden of guilt. They walked in silence, their heads bowed, knowing that they had been the ones to lead the village astray. As they entered the forest, the trees seemed to close in around them, the branches whispering in a language they could not understand. The light dimmed, and a chill crept through the air, as though the forest itself disapproved of their presence. They walked for what felt like hours, their steps weighed down by dread, until finally they came to a clearing. There in the center stood Amina. She was dressed in beautiful clothes, her hair flowing like a river over her shoulders. She looked at them with calm eyes, but there was a strength in her gaze that made even the bravest among them look away. Behind her stood Ngali, his true form revealed. His eyes burned with a fierce, unearthly light, and his presence filled the clearing like a thunderstorm ready to break. His voice, deep and powerful, filled the air. You dared to harm the one who was mine, he said, his gaze sweeping over the trembling villagers. You cast her out, accusing her of things she had never done. You left her to die. Now you come to beg forgiveness, hoping to lift the suffering you brought upon yourselves. The villagers fell to their knees, their hands clasped in supplication. Please, Great One, they cried. We have wronged Amina. We have come to ask her for forgiveness and yours. Spare our village, for we have learned our lesson. We know the terrible price of jealousy and cruelty." Ngali's eyes burned with anger, but beside him, Amina placed a gentle hand on his arm. She looked down at the villagers, her heart filled with compassion, despite all they had done to her. She could see their regret, and she felt the depth of their sorrow. Most of all, she remembered the babies, the children, innocent, who still had to suffer for the crime of their relatives. "Please, Ngali," she said softly, her voice full of kindness. "They have wronged me, yes, but they have also suffered for their actions. Let us show mercy, so they may learn to forgive others as well, so their children can learn to forgive." At her words, Ngali's anger softened. With a wave of his hand, he lifted the drought, and a gentle rain began to fall, soaking the dry earth and filling the villagers' hearts with relief and gratitude. They watched in awe as the forest around them bloomed with new life, a symbol of forgiveness and renewal. The rain continued to fall gently upon the villagers, soaking their clothes and washing away the dust of the drought. They looked up in wonder, faces turned to the sky, feeling hope blossom in their hearts for the first time in many, many weeks. But as they looked back at Amina, their joy was quickly overshadowed by the shame and guilt they felt for what they had done to her. Ngali stood tall beside Amina, his presence fierce and powerful, his eyes blazing like fire, looked down upon the villagers with a mixture of anger and sorrow. He took a step forward, his voice echoing like thunder through the forest. "Do you now see the harm your jealousy has caused?" he asked, his voice as deep as the roots of the oldest trees. "Amina came to you with kindness and love. Yet you turned on her, accusing her of bringing misfortune. Your hearts were poisoned by envy, and because of this, you nearly took her life." His gaze swept over Halima, Zuri, and Adana, who bowed their heads, trembling with remorse. "Great Spirit," Baba Uluko said, stepping forward with humble hands raised. "We have learned the error of our ways. We allowed fear and jealousy to cloud our minds. We beg for forgiveness and pledge to never let such hatred enter our hearts again." Ngali's eyes softened, but his anger had not fully abated. "It is not for me alone to forgive," he said. "It is for Amina, the one whom you wronged so deeply, to decide if your regret is worthy of mercy." The villagers turned their eyes to Amina, who stood quietly beside Ngali, her gaze calm but filled with sadness. For a moment, she was silent, her heart heavy with the memory of their betrayal. She remembered the whispers, the hurtful looks, the fear that had driven her from her home. She remembered the flames of their torches and the cruel words that had nearly led to her death. She remembered the flame and the heat that scorched her skin. But Amina's heart was gentle, and she could see the sorrow in their eyes. She knew that holding onto anger would only bring more suffering, both for herself and for the people who had once been her friends and family. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, her voice as soft as the rain falling around them. "You have caused me great pain," she said, looking each of them in the eyes. "I trusted you. I loved this village, and yet you cast me out when I needed you most. I was left alone with nothing but my tears to comfort me." The villagers lowered their heads, unable to meet her gaze. Amina's voice trembled, but her eyes held no bitterness. "But I have found peace here in the forest," she continued. "I have learned that love and forgiveness are stronger than anger and resentment. If my forgiveness can help you find peace, then I will give it freely." A murmur of relief and gratitude swept through the villagers. Tears fell from Halima's eyes as she knelt before Amina. "Oh, Amina," she whispered, her voice choked with regret. "We were wrong. You showed us kindness and we repaid you with cruelty. May the gods of our land help us. We do not deserve your forgiveness." Amina placed a gentle hand on Halima's shoulder, lifting her from the ground. "Let this be a lesson for all of us," she said softly. "Jealousy and fear can make even the kindest of hearts do terrible things. But now we have a chance to heal and to make things right." Ngali, watching this act of compassion, felt his own heart soften. The rage in his eyes dimmed, and he looked at Amina with admiration and love. "You have a heart stronger than any I have known, Amina," he said, his voice full of reverence. "Your kindness has lifted the darkness from this village and brought peace where there was once only suffering." With a wave of his hand, Ingali restored the forest to its full glory. Flowers bloomed around them, the trees stood taller, and animals emerged from the shadows, their eyes shining with trust. The villagers gasped in awe, feeling the weight of their guilt melt away as the forest filled with life and beauty once more. As the rain ceased, the villagers thanked Amina and Ingali, promising to honor the lesson they had learned and to live with hearts free of envy and bitterness. And as they turned to leave, their heads held high with renewed purpose, they knew that their lives had been forever changed by the girl they had once cast out. With peace restored and the village once again in harmony, Ingali looked upon Amina with warmth and love. He knew that her heart filled with compassion and forgiveness had not only saved her village, but had brought balance to the land as well. In the days that followed, the village thrived, their crops grew tall and green, and the river flowed with the fullness they had not seen in many years. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the village in soft golden light, the sound of horses' hooves echoed in the distance. The villagers stopped what they were doing, looking toward the edge of the forest in awe. A procession of golden chariots, adorned with brilliant jewels and shimmering fabrics, entered the village. At the front rode Ingali, majestic and proud, dressed in robes of deep green and gold that seemed to shimmer like sunlight filtering through the trees. He dismounted, his presence commanding yet kind, and walked toward Mama Ayana and Baba Kato's hut. The villagers gathered, their faces filled with wonder, whispering among themselves about the godlike figure before them. When Ingali reached Amina's parents, he bowed low, an act that shocked the humbled crowd. "Mama Ayana, Baba Kato," Ingali said, his voice strong but gentle. "I have come to honor your family, for I humbly ask Amina's hand in marriage, not only as a god fulfilling a promise, but as one who loves her with all his heart." Tears welled in Mama Ayana's eyes as she looked at the radiant figure before her. Baba Kato's voice trembled with emotion. "You honor us greatly, Ingali. Nothing can make us happier than to see our daughter wed to one who cherishes her as you do." Ingali turned to the villagers, his gaze steady. "I came not to take her from you in secrecy, but to celebrate this union openly, as it should be. Let us prepare a wedding that will be remembered for generations." The village burst into activity. For days, the villagers worked tirelessly, decorating the square with vibrant flowers, colorful fabric, and lanterns that twinkled like stars. Even Halima, Zuri, and Adanna, their hearts softened by Amina's forgiveness, worked harder than anyone, eager to show their gratitude. On the day of the wedding, the village transformed into a place of wonder. The square was alive with music, laughter, and the scent of fresh flowers. Villagers dressed in their finest garments, carrying offerings of fruits, spices, and hand-woven cloth. The air buzzed with excitement as everyone waited to see the bride and groom. When Amina stepped into the square, dressed in a gown spun from the finest silk, the crowd gasped. Her beauty, radiant and serene, seemed to shine brighter than ever. Her hair was adorned with golden threads and delicate flowers and priceless beads, and her smile carried a quiet joy. Ingali stood waiting at the center, his robes glistening in the sunlight, a crown of woven branches in gold resting on his head, signifying his bond with the forest. The village priest, Baba Oluko, stepped forward to begin the ceremony. His voice rang out clearly as he addressed the crowd. "Today, we witness the union of Amina, daughter of our village, and Ingali, god of the forest. May their love bring harmony between our people and the forest, and may their story remind us all of the power of forgiveness and love." Ingali took Amina's hands, his eyes glowing with devotion. "Amina," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "From the moment I saw you, I knew your heart was as pure and kind as the forest itself. I vow to cherish you, to protect you, and to honor the love we have chosen." Amina smiled, her voice steady as she replied, "Ngali, you gave me strength when I had none, and showed me the beauty of a world I had never seen. I vow to stand by your side, to honor your wisdom, and to love you always." As they exchanged their vows, the crowd felt an energy ripple through the air. The sky seemed to brighten, and a soft breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers. Amina and Ngali sealed their union, and the villagers erupted into cheers, their hearts filled with joy. The celebration continued deep into the night. Dancers filled the square, musicians played lively tunes, and the villagers shared food and laughter under the stars. It was a wedding like no other, a moment of unity and renewal for everyone. As the festivities wound down, Ngali and Amina approached Mama Ayana and Baba Kato. "Thank you for everything," Amina said, embracing them both. "I will always carry you in my heart, Mama." "You are our greatest blessing, Amina," Mama Ayana said, tears streaming down her face. "Go with love and know that we are proud of you." With a final farewell to the villagers, Amina and Ngali mounted their chariot and began their journey to the forest. The villagers watched as the golden procession disappeared into the trees, their hearts full of hope and gratitude. In the years that followed, the village and the forest thrived under Amina and Ngali's care. The villagers never forgot the lesson they had learned, the dangers of envy, the value of forgiveness, and the strength of love. And on quiet nights, when the wind whispered through the trees, they would pause and smile, knowing that Amina and Ngali were watching over them, a bridge between two worlds.